Hello viewers, my name is Adam and this is Sticky Me Productions bringing you another ranking video. And we are talking fighting games. We had a few fighting game reviews on this channel and I think I said it before, but fighting games is actually my favorite genre in video games. I like the concept of like figuring out new moves and practicing endless hours on end, trying to how you can flow together combos and test their skills into a very somewhat competitive environment. Combination of tense concentration, but also the rawness of just fierce combat gameplay. I play many different types of genres within the subgenre field of fighting games, and plenty of classic franchises like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. The Capcom is very known in the fighting game space, as they've been a very pioneer in that field, and not just Street Fighter, but you're talking to Darkstalkers and Power Stone. And the rival SNK is also very known. It used to be like a very big deal with the Neo Geo stage, but they're slowly coming back, especially the resurgence of Vital Fury, Sea of the Wolves being a recent title at the time of this video. This video, the ranking list is representative of the many subgenres there are. The only subgenre that isn't represented in my list is the sporting fighting game space, like we're talking boxing games, UFC, or wrestling. Like that. Even though I did play a few of those titles, I wasn't really drawn. I don't necessarily like the limitations of the gameplay. It's like it's not really as free flowing or very as diverse as some of the other titles. For the actual list itself to be one game per franchise, just to make it easier, but it's not necessarily like too restricted, because I do feel as though that there's a reason why I ranked a particular game higher than others. So yet again, let's begin with honorable mentions here, and to start things off to be more personable and the representative of what my interests are, but also introduce you to the subgenre of fighting games. We're talking Godzilla Save the Earth. Now, if you're a fan of this channel, if you're at least aware of it, part of the area that I do discuss on this channel is the kaiju space. And Godzilla is a very prime property that we discuss here. That's one of my favorite properties of all time. It's unfortunate that Godzilla is very niche in the video game realm, and growing up, like the main Godzilla video games that were developed were the Pipeworks Atari games, starting with Destroy All Monsters Melee, which will be having a remaster finally at the time of this video, like around the time when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out. But the sequel, Save the Earth, is reasons honorable mention here, because it is basically Destroy All Monsters Melee, just more. It's expanding upon what Destroy All Monsters Melee is, which was itself an arena-based fighting game. Feels more complete as a video game itself, with the single player options, of course multiplayer introduced online mode, very limited at the time. But it helps set the groundwork for it. It's like, it's not officially on this list. It's an honorable mention. It is a good indication of what to look forward to. It is actually on the list that's going to be coming up very shortly. Another game on the honorable mentions here is Guilty Gear X2. Somewhat as a weapons-based fighter, just on a more 2D plane. SNK had a few, Last Blade and also Samurai Showdown. Two game properties I actually never played, but I know of it. Guilty Gear X2, if you know, Guilty Gear was very recurring, still going on as a franchise. Very hard edge, fast paced combat. It has very great with defensive maneuvers, and also has very high flying aerial combat as well. I feel as though its inclusion of the instant kill feature, which is very basically like a finishing move, similar to what Mortal Kombat has with fatalities. Fortunately, like other later titles don't actually have it. Like they stopped doing it with X3 or X3, but the recent title Get to Gear Strive doesn't have that. It's hit and miss whatever time that feature is happening, and I feel as though Get to Gear without the instant kills is like very empty on. And the last honorable mention that I'd like to address is Capcom versus SK2, and this is a very important, very personable fighting game list. About the entry, even though it's an honorable mention, I'd like to address it here is my entry point to fighting games. At least the core aspects to fighting games with introducing Capcom and SK Fighters. My brothers, this was like the first introduction to it, and being familiarized with some of the like franchises that both companies are known for. It has some of the best of both worlds. The groove system is very helps diversify the gameplay as well. Different varying effects on how you can tackle certain special moves and chain them together. And I also like the vibes. It has some really good soundtrack, and the character interactions between the different studios fighters is always good to see. It's too, like, they recently re-released this as part of the Fighting Collection at the time of this video. I think it's Capcom Fighting Collections 2, as I think. So if you have a chance to play Capcom vs. SK2, like comment below how you feel, what was your memories of any of these honorable lists. But the real list of my ranking video of my favorite fighting games starts now. War of the Monsters. Like I said, I'm a fan of the kaiju genre. It is an arena fighter with monsters begs you on to scale. I do like that this piece of scale. Even though you're dealing with playing as like 50-foot monster creatures and titans and robots and whatnot, the seedy arena is something that still holds up. The physics of destruction, it exceeds, even though it came out like a year after Destroy All Monsters Melee. And even then it's still better than the entire Pipeworks video game that Godzilla run in terms of the city destruction. Its 1950s vintage aesthetic is really put as to the personality of War of the Monsters, and like it does have this if they had the rights to certain creatures like Kong or Godzilla, you can clearly see the inspirations from a lot of them, like Kongor or Torgera, Praetor. The single player arc mode is very awesome and very unique in how it has like actual non-playable bosses, boss-like characters that are fun to fight. Depending on they're saying no matter what characters you play as, but it still has that like most fighting games, each character has their own ending that is still personable. I like this. It's still one of the best kaiju video games, and still hoping for Godzilla to have a new AAA, hopefully, video game to match this energy and exceed it as well. Going up on the list is number 9 is Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3. Now this is obviously representing the anime fighting genre, but it's also an arena-based fighter as well due to its vast scape of the environments that you're able to travel, like fight in, as players being on the vast character selection of Z fighters at your disposal. Anime fighters is still going on trend. It has been popularized because of the popularity of Dragon Ball as a franchise in the United States, but it's always been anime fighters is basically still be very prevalent, especially in Japan, where they are the home to. A runner-up would have been the Naruto Ultimate series, but I feel as though the Naruto Ultimate series does have the Budokai Tenkaichi games to thank for because of how it approached the arena-based fighter. I think for more fighting game enthusiasts or competitors, Dragon Ball Fighter Z would have been more on down the line because of this more traditional 2D fighting plane. I like Budokai Tenkaichi's gameplay better because it is better representation of the fighting, the many fights that in the actual Dragon Ball manga and the anime itself, because you're dealing with characters who can fly, travel vast distances, and be able to catch a dash and catch up to it. And matter of fact, the environment changes and based on destruction or very apocalyptic level attacks. It's very adds to the atmosphere and the intensity of what the Dragon Ball series brings to the table, not only in as a franchise itself, but also to this fighting game realm. And number 8 on this ranking video is King of Fighters 2002. Now I played a few King of Fighter games itself, from King of Fighters 2002, 2003, because it was a bundle. A couple of the Maximum Impact games, and some of the I played. Like, I had those games. I played King of Fighters 13 a little bit, and so, and at the time some arcades, some of the earlier titles like King of Fighters 1998. But what makes 2002 different, it sets apart, is I feel though it does bring out some of the best in SNK in itself, being the only SNK game that is actually going to be on this list. The traditional 2D sprite era of fighting games that SNK brought to the table had a lot of personality. The expressive animations and character work that they are able to bring to the table with their before and after character, before and after a fight begins and ends. The combat gameplay itself is actually, I feel as though it's more intense compared to other King of Fighters games. The tone of it is very visceral. The sound of design of very hard-hitting attacks on display is something that's very missing in some King of Fighters titles, and even some games itself in modern day. It's very raw and has so many of the core essentials that SNK brought to the table. Its max power gauges of how you're able to build that meter up and perform super special moves, and as well as being in max state to really be more defensive and offensive with the gameplay. Like a staple in many classic SNK fighting games were the super desperation move, where you're able to super move which you're able to pull off if you have a max gauge, but also if you're on low health, you're able to basically come back and reverse turn the tides with a very devastating, difficult to pull off move, but still very rewarding. In fact, SNK is at least classic SNK, is very much known for having a lot of their characters to be had a very extensive move list that has very complex input commands. Street Fighter sometimes has this with some characters, but it's by no means as very intricate and detailed that SNK brought to the table. They don't do that now, especially with the game the recent SNK that I have at the time of this video is Fatal Fury. Sea of the Wolves, where they really simplified even what they consider classic controls. Yeah, they really just simplified those to the max. So I like this because it is very much raw SNK to a T, and it's still very memorable and nostalgic to me. Number 7 is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Now, on my honorable mention, I did say Capcom vs. SNK 2 was very close on this list, but Marvel vs. Capcom 2 it beats it out as a crossover fighter on this list, because I also feel as though it's one of the best, and still one of the, actually to me, the best tag team fighting games out there. The way it's able to switch out between your many different fighters from either Marvel comics or Capcom characters, like mid-fight or mid-combo, if you will, really adds to the gameplay flow, fast-paced, very over-the-type abilities and move sets that at your disposal really represents the very comic book side of things that is very representative of Marvel Comics. Now, its inclusion on this list is probably a little bit premature, because at the time of this video is another Marvel fighting game from a Japanese studio Arc System Works that are known for developing Guilty Gear, Marvel's Tokon Fighting Souls, which is very much on gameplay side of things, at least from my point of view, is very influential. It gets its influence from Marvel vs. Capcom fighting series. So I feel as though, even though this game could, like, I have yet to play that game at this time, this clear influence from Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is like, it can't be denied. And as a tag team, like, again, as a tag team fighter, is still one of the best in the business. Especially how you're able to flow and actually be like an actual team. Number 6 is Soul Calibur 4. Now, I chose Soul Calibur in general to be the representation of the weapons-based fighter as compared to Guilty Gear. I think Guilty Gear actually does have more, like, a few characters that don't actually have weapons at their disposal. So, the mere fact that it's being a weapons-based fighter is in its DNA. Now, most people will actually say Soul Calibur 2 is still the peak of the Soul Calibur, but I feel as though, for me, Soul Calibur 4 is pretty much even more influential because so many of this gameplay mechanics has been carried over into the later installments, like the critical finish like ability, which you're able to basically do a finishing move. It's been changed to subsequent to following games as a critical edge, which is basically just a regular super move that you can do midway through the fight instead of doing it as a finishing move. The armor break system, which you're able to break apart, like damage your opponent during different stages of the fight. Yes, adds to the realism to fighting space. The classic ring outs are still a thing, and Soul Calibur is sometimes known as Tekken with weapons because it is made from the same company, Namco Bandai, and it's also, I think, some of the same fighting and the same game director. So it has that going for it because the gameplay does have, so, like, in the control scheme is very similar to Tekken as well. Soul Calibur 4, like I mentioned, is did introduce many of the later gameplay mechanics, but it also carries over something that was popularized in Soul Calibur 2, which is the guest fighter system. Soul Calibur 2 known for having different guest fighters depending on what console you picked. Soul Calibur 4 has Star Wars characters due to its cross promotion at the time of the Star Wars video game, Star Wars Unleashed, one of the best Star Wars games still to this day. Fun title is Soul Calibur 4. Maybe a little like controversial depending on due to some people picking Soul Calibur 2 over this, but I personally like it because of its influence and capabilities of what the gameplay mechanics that it introduced and that clearly carried over in later titles. Moving on with Virtua Fighter 5 as our number 5 slot. Virtua Fighter being such a pioneer in its own right as it introduced the 3D fighters. At the time of this video, Virtua Fighter 6 or Virtua Fighter's Crossroads is set to be released a year from now from this video. That aims to be even more influential and probably more dynamic. From the gameplay I had, like when it was Crossroads was announced, it had some interesting realistic defensive capabilities I hope still maintains in the final product, as opposed to carrying over what Virtua Fighter 5 basically polished and from what Virtua Fighter is known for, which is essentially very raw, less gimmicky fighting game with playing as multiple different fighters with different fighting styles without the supernatural or fantasy elements. You still have juggling as a feature to chain together combos, but it has a very simple control scheme that doesn't aim to be as flashy as its competitors, which is probably another reason why Virtua Fighter and the series in and of itself is not as popular as some of its competitors, and especially with the runner-up that I'll discuss in a second. But Virtua Fighter, there's a reason why it's not as higher up as like the top 3 is because in itself, Virtua Fighter never really had like a very engaging story, even though they have a diverse set of characters with very intriguing movesets. The personalities is there, but not the character story. Something that's a very major hook that other fighting games in the field have over Virtua Fighter. But the mere fact is how very high on this list in the midway front is based on this gameplay solely. Number 4 on this list is Street Fighter 6. Wow, so Street Fighter is one of the most prolific fighting game series in video games, period. It's definitely one of the most popular. Is most competitive, like popular competitor will probably be Mortal Kombat in Western, so Mortal Kombat for the West, Street Fighter for the East. Street Fighter 6 is the most recent title at the time of this video, and I'm going to take the time to actually give this a better grade than what I initially gave this review on, which is one of the few review titles that's on this channel. In terms of having a fighting game review, Street Fighter 6 at the time when I had it, I gave it just a solid good, maybe because of when it was initially released. It had a very good concept in terms of expanding upon its single player modes as well as online, but I did feel as though due to its very modernization with the controls, it made the game very simple in terms of play value. And the characters, at the time were had very different variety, basically compared to previous entries. It didn't flow. They didn't really flow as well as they used to. Now, few years after, and many patches included, it's been put on here. Street Fighter 6 has been one of the most engaging and rewarding video game fighting experiences that I've had. Its patches really did benefit its very bad and characters, especially characters previous characters from previous entries. I think Ryu was a very difficult character to even play with. A lot of his very more stiff gameplay, and now he's a little more flow like most other characters on here, and that Street Fighter 6 has to offer. Street Fighter 6 has been one of the very improvement overall from its initial release to its current competitive field that I find myself in now. Now, number 3 is Tekken 5. I have the review of Tekken 8 on this video on this channel, and I said that was great at the time. Tekken 8 has been not in don't find myself going back as replayable like I had in Tekken Pass. Tekken 5 is definitely peak pure Tekken before the additional bells and whistles of super moves or desperations or the rage system that has taken over since Tekken 6. Tekken 5 is very much that classic Tekken gameplay, but I do feel as though the story also peaked here in terms of the Heihachi Mishima's family and his balls, and the introduction of one of my favorite fighting game characters of all time, Raven, and also Asuka. Because I'm talking about 3D fighters from Tekken versus Virtua Fighter. Tekken definitely has a step above Virtua Fighter, mainly only due to the characters' stories is basically what edges out between the two as a solid entry that as a strong staple in arcades till to this day. Tekken 5 is definitely a hands down a peak Tekken material. Now the runner-up is Mortal Kombat 11. Now Mortal Kombat has been a very strong staple in fighting games due to its mature, M-rated, bloody, and gory combat. I feel as though the only 2 games that come close to its intense level of violence in a fighting game will be the recently released, at the time of this video, The Invincible Versus, which is based off the Invincible comic book and TV show, as well as Celebrity Deathmatch, which is based off the MTV claymation TV show when MTV was at its peak. We have a review on this channel for Mortal Kombat 11, as well as the follow-up Mortal Kombat 1, which is a bit of a disappointment due to how much it stripped away on what Mortal Kombat 11 has been building up to in terms of content, story, as well as also gameplay. Mortal Kombat 11 really is peak Mortal Kombat in terms of the defining factor of when they officially became a 3D, 2D fighter with 3D graphics. One of as a Mortal Kombat game that would have been on this list would have been Mortal Kombat Deception, which is more of a traditional 3D fighter, which would be more when you move it really similar to Tekken and Virtual Fighter when they transitioned to 3D. I feel as though the customization is really a standout feature. What Mortal Kombat has been able to do, that Mortal Kombat 11 basically reached its pinnacle in terms of the multi-level of depth and customization that you're able to have with your individual take on Mortal Kombat fighters. Its story is also still one of the best in fighting games. So how they clashed many timelines together, and that leads into what Mortal Kombat 1 has that had going for it, that kind of disappointingly falters on that regard. So you can pretty much think at Mortal Kombat 11 as basically just the finale if you want, because just how much it gets right. My favorite fighting game as of right now in this video is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is also a title that I have a review on this channel. But Super Smash Bros. Has been a very staple in my household, but also fighting games in general, as it basically pioneered the platformer fighters. Many platformers that had Super Smash Bros. Made a staple as basically a 3D fighter with a plane that basically has multi levels that you knock characters off a plane or knock out, if you will, to win a match. It is very much not only a good fighter in a competitive sense with this, even though it has very simple controls, this vast pantheon of fighters is very unique to play. It has to play despite its simplicity as a video game itself, due to how well people could just easily jump in, but be aware that the competitive scene as small as Super Smash Brothers is very much as intense as any other fighter. And when Super Smash Bros. Introduced the guest fighters into the Super Smash Bros. Series, all bets were off, because essentially every video game developer that you can think of wanted to put their fighters into the Super Smash Bros. Field. But it pretty much solidified Super Smash Bros. As not only a good fighting game, but also a celebration of video games in general. And so there we have it. That's my ranking video of my favorite fighting games so far at the time of this video. I might do a short redo, or not redo, probably a little bit later down the line, depending on what other fighting games that I find interesting, or able to hold a candle to some of the titles that I've mentioned here. What will be your list of your favorite fighting games? Maybe some obscure title that many people don't necessarily are aware of. I definitely mentioned some in my intro in this video that I do think should probably be rebooted, like Darkstalkers. Sometimes fighting games have a very bad rap because of its competitive and difficult nature of trying to know how to perform many different move sets or combos, but it does have that learning curve that keeps it away from being completely mainstream. But I think due to modern capabilities of simplifying controls, have brought in a more mainstream audience that otherwise would have been turned off from fighting games now. My name is Adam, and this has been Seeking Me Productions. Be sure to also talk with us on our other social media outlets of Instagram, Threads, and also Letterboxd for other content we don't necessarily post on this channel. But again, if you want to contact us, it's Seeking Me Productions. See you later.